Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and we are in the top 10. Finally, we're in the top 10, and we're in the top 10 with a team that wasn't even originally 10th, but because of the heartbreaking patellar tendon injury to superstar left tackle Rashawn Slater, the Chargers have fallen here to number 10, which says a lot about the quality of this team, how well they're coached. They got my guy, Jim Harbaugh, Mr. Whiny, complainy, but super genius, who in a single year completely changed the culture of what once was this wimpy, soft organization and turned them into like this hard-nosed, strong running game, aggressive defensively. They just crushed it last year, and I'm looking for them to build upon that again this year. They're going to kick Joe Alt to left tackle. Right tackle now is a huge issue. It does kind of destroy their rankings for the offensive line and their offense in general. But, Greg Roman, exotic, run design, heavy run design. So will they get around it? Will they just put the best run blocking guy at right tackle? We'll see how they get around all that. How is Justin Herbert going to respond? I think that it makes the Joe Alt pick just look so much better, to be honest. From a weapons perspective, they don't really have anything going on right now. We'll get to that. Their run game with Omari and Hampton and Najee Harris coming into the fold feels like an upgrade over last year. We'll see what that looks like in the rankings itself. Keenan Allen's returned to play receiver opposite Lad Conkey and rookie Trey Harris. On the defensive side, they've lost some key pieces that made them really good last year. Poona Ford, who we just covered with the Rams, was a huge piece of that. They still have Khalil Mack, but they lost notorious Charger legend, I will say, Joey Bosa. Derwin James is still there. They lost Asante Samuel. He's sort of just sitting there in free agency. Why are you not bringing him back? There's just a lot of weird decisions, but they're so well run that it's difficult for me to question it because they still have such good quality players, but it really starts with the scheme. It really starts with the culture that's being built there, and it starts with Jim Harbaugh.
He's just an all-timer. You can call me biased because, you're a Michigan fan. Jim Harbaugh proved his worth in spades in really one year. He came in, he took a roster that had these pieces to it that, from Herbert to some of the offensive linemen to the guys on the defensive side of the ball, and he just went, I know how to meld this group into being what it should have been under Brandon Staley. And he immediately made them a tough out for everybody. He was able to identify a lot of the weaknesses that they had, where the holes were in the roster, so they were able to figure that part out really quickly as well. They designed a scheme that really hid the weaknesses of the offense in particular, and when you have Greg Roman, who has really been made famous for his run game style and how he likes to disperse the run game in all these different unique ways where you can't really predict what he's going to be doing. And he operates really well with a very exotic backfield, a very mixed up backfield, which is why you go get Najee Harris and Omari and Hampton to mix in with who you already have. Because now Greg Roman has all these pieces to the puzzle. And Harbaugh, being like an offensive guy as well, I think is able to bring Greg Roman's overall strategy to like the 21st century. Because Greg Roman was criticized for a long time for kind of being uninventive, and then you get to the playoffs against some of the better coached teams and they were just like, he was getting circles coached around him. And that's why the Baltimore teams that he was on maybe didn't succeed at the level that they maybe should have, right? But I think Harbaugh last year showed, okay, I can tweak this without being overbearing, and it allows Greg Roman to have this, to be able to really get into a rhythm, but then also have this overarching strategy around him that Harbaugh comes up with and designs that then allows him to put together the right play calling packages and having the right if-then scenarios drawn out well ahead of time, because Harbaugh is so smart and he's so strategic, and he's able to use he understands the game so well, and he understands how to incorporate what you do during the week and how to adjust those things during the game, and when to adjust them during the game, and when to roll certain things out without being this micromanager. So, and Harbaugh allows him to focus a lot more on the culture and just getting the right personnel in place for his coordinators. And then he has Jesse Minter, who he brought over from Michigan, who is rolling out that Mike Macdonald defense that we saw in Baltimore that did so well, that got Mike Macdonald a head coaching job in Seattle. And to bring him in and then to look at the pieces that they had, like bringing in Elijah Molden, for example, who, with his versatility, being able to use Derwin James as that Kyle Hamilton role, and then having Alohi Gilman, everyone tells me how to pronounce his first name, being that like Geno Stone of the defense, it really worked out quite well last year. They did lose a couple of key pieces to the group, but they have so many other pieces in place, and they have such a great rotation that Jesse Minter's job is really just to understand the situations, understand when's the right time to roll out the personnel. It's not the easiest job in the world, and Minter still has a long way to go, I think, from a strategic standpoint. That's why he comes in as 17th for me. But he's somebody that is well on his way to perhaps becoming the next great defensive coordinator in the league. And I can't stress enough that has a lot to do with the head coach and sort of the trickle-down effect, that having a head coach who is incredibly sure of himself, confident, smart, and for him to come in and immediately after 1 year just establish himself this way, that's why he's my number 3 head coach. There's literally only 2 that I would have ranked ahead of him right now, and it has to do with just overall success at the pro level, because Harbaugh had a lot of success in San Francisco. He was really just this quarterback guru, this quarterback whisperer to get Alex Smith and Colin Kaepernick in particular. Colin Kaepernick, without Jim Harbaugh, was a decent middle of the pack backup quality quarterback. Alex Smith ended up really clicking. Things really clicked for Alex Smith after getting with Harbaugh. And then he ended up being able to get like that second half of his career as this like middle of the pack quality starter. But to get Justin Herbert on his team, and it's really going to be able to expand his game. Now Harbaugh's got some slight deficiencies, obviously, to his game. It has stopped him from having top level success. It stops him from being a Super Bowl winning head coach, which is why I can't just put him number 1, even though I think from just a pure brain standpoint, football IQ standpoint, culture building standpoint, it's hard to point out any coach that's better than him at that. But then has he able to then translate it to playoff success, and how's he able to translate it to championship success at the pro level? With San Francisco, they got to 1 Super Bowl. And then there were situations during that run where, the emotions maybe got the best of him. He made some off decisions in some key situations. And there was a mixture in a little bit of bad luck as well. The game against my New York Giants in the NFC Championship game with the fumble on the punt. So there is a little mixture of that in there. But, in the Super Bowl, he kind of did get outcoached by his brother to a degree. And I think that now him coming here, though, he's taken a lot of the micromanaging aspects out of his game, and it worked out in his favor in year 1. We'll see how it continues here in year 2, because I think particularly with Greg Roman did really well with not so much micromanaging, but I don't think he can really give up so much space to Greg Roman, because then you end up with the situation that they had in Baltimore with Roman, where in the playoffs and stuff like that, he didn't really know how to steer away from, what he was truly comfortable with. He wasn't really able to get outside of the comfort zone and take a lot of chances. And from a passing perspective. He didn't really have any strong qualities in that sense. He was one of the worst operated passing games with Greg Roman. Now, that's why you have Harbaugh, who notoriously knows how to get guys to be these great passers, even though a main focus of his game has always been to, run the ball and control the clock like old school football. Being a former quarterback, I think that pairing now is going to be something that Roman did not have previously, and now that he has it, I think that's going to take his offense now to a completely different level.
Can you guys like this video so I can get some ads in here, and this will be a real ad break? Come on, man. I mean, I know, like, the background, it looks great, but it'd be nice to have a little bit more. I want to say, here, use my promo code, Will Knows, or whatever one they decide. Let's get back to the video.
Justin Herbert is my 8th ranked quarterback in the league coming into this season. And to get the stability that he's now getting, and I think last year, he proved it beyond a shadow of a doubt that now that he's got some stability on the offensive side, he's got a head coach that, can truly relate to him, and that they can go in there and they can actually talk strategy with, unlike with Brandon Staley where that wasn't really a thing. He took his game from an efficiency level to just ridiculously high peaks. 33 big time throws to only 13 turnover worthy plays, just about 77% adjusted completion percentage. Operated at all levels, the deep ball and intermediates. He was just incredibly dominant in those areas. The play action game was incredible, and that's a credit to Greg Roman and all that for setting up such a great run game, committing to the run game, which then allowed Justin Herbert to be able to execute in the play action game with some favorable matchups, some favorable defenses where he was really dragging people into the box, and then being able to, and being smart enough and being confident enough to pull the trigger to go over the top of them into those intermediate and deep areas. The one thing that Justin Herbert did fantastically, as good as any quarterback in the league, one of the best, if not the best, was against the blitz. Now, they did a really good job of picking up blitzes with the blitz protection, but Justin Herbert did so many good things pre-snap to account for that. And he had great tackles, that were really smart. The running backs with Dobbins and all that, did a great job. But his ability to identify where the blitzer was, know the route combinations, know the scheme, know the options that were out there, being able to figure it out pre-snap, signal to his receivers, having smart receivers out there like Alad McConkey who can run a great option route, who understands the softness in the zones that would come from a zone blitz from an opposing defense. Him and Herbert getting on the same page with all those guys. He was executing at such a high level against the blitz. If you didn't get to Justin Herbert, he was going to destroy you out there. And that's a feature that the great quarterbacks have. Even under pressure, he gets a C grade, which is one of the better grades that you can get as well. So he was able to really navigate the pocket, use his athleticism. From a designed run standpoint, I don't know that he's necessarily somebody that they're going to want to do that with, even though he has the capabilities of doing that, and Greg Roman would love to do that. But he's such a great athlete in the pocket and behind the line of scrimmage, and being able to navigate, escape, and keep his eyes downfield and find the right guy to throw the ball to. It does allow the offense to be more athletic and more inventive and play a little bit faster, because he's able to play so well under the pressure of the opposing defense. He's not afraid to stand there in the pocket and take a hit and throw the ball accurately. It's a matter now of him being able to take his game to the next level. And I do have a concern that with the way that they've built the team, that's going to be a little bit tougher for him. I think it's going to be significantly tougher now that Rashawn Slater is out, because I feel like they sort of had the two bookends there for him where you didn't really have to worry about shooting off double teams out there. The double teams could really focus on those B gaps and those A gaps, which then allowed for a much more controlled pocket area and better areas for him to step up into the throws. There may be a lot of that lacking with Trey Pipkins now at the right tackle spot and Joe Alt flipping over to left after getting so used to playing on the right, going back to left tackle. How long does it take for him to make that adjustment back? And now that he's going to be playing against, backside edge rushers, how different is that going to be his experience, and how is that going to affect Justin Herbert? As long as Herbert stays within the system that's designed for him, though, and understand when it's appropriate to improvise and go off script, and believing in his study up into that point in the preparation process that he did so well last year, if he's able to stay with that, there's no reason why he can't be in this same position. I don't know that he's an MVP candidate because I don't know if the statistical output is going to reflect how well he's going to do throughout a game and throughout a season and throughout, from drive to drive, game to game. But I do think that he's the right guy in place. He's the best quarterback that Harbaugh's ever had. And I can see him continuing to grow, even though it's hard to say where he could grow much better, I guess. I guess in the short game, he wasn't just an elite level guy. I guess he could, turn down the turnover-worthy plays. But that all comes with him furthering and understanding the offense as well. So we'll watch for those things. We'll watch for him to be able to maintain the play-action game, be able to maintain his strength against the blitz. But even with a slight regression in those areas, he's still going to be falling within this top 10 quarterback area. There's going to be weeks where Justin Herbert's going to look like the best quarterback in the entire league this year. That I can guarantee, depending on matchup, depending on what kind of matchup he gets that week. That's going to be something that he's going to really, I think, be able to pull off here. It's a really exciting pairing that I think when the hire happened of Harbaugh, that people were really anticipating, this is going to get good eventually. The fact that it got so good right away is a really good sign for you ain't seen nothing yet, and I think that's something for Chargers fans to get really excited about. Something not so exciting is their weapons group, who comes in dead last for me. It's a very interesting group, I guess, to say the least. I'm not very confident in its quality. I mean, they got one guy who I'm really confident in, and it's Ladd McConkey, who just absolutely dominated last year out of the slot. He was sneaky good as a contested catch guy. He doesn't have this breakaway speed. He's basically Julian Edelman, right? He's Julian Edelman. He's Wes Welker. He's insert, shifty, good route running, sneaky quick, white slot receiver. That's what he is. He operated incredibly well in all levels of the game, minus the screen game. He had a couple of those little bubble screens and whatnot that he doesn't have that breakaway speed to do well in those situations, I don't feel. And he didn't do well in that. But what he does do well is the double moves, the shiftiness and the route running and all that. And being a sure-handed guy, he kind of had a couple of struggles that weren't really anticipated. Almost 7% drop rate, which I guess is fine. You want to see him get that to closer to 5, you would hope. But from a contested catch rate, almost 62% with 13 successful contested catches. His fearlessness in traffic, his ability to fight through the hands of the other defensive back out there, and being able to anticipate contact upon the reception and being able to hang on to the ball. Fantastic feature for him. He had 110 targets, playing 70% out of the slot. He was able to motion out and play a little bit of wide. I would anticipate that not being something they do all that much, especially with some of the players that they've added now in this offseason. But almost 1,200 yards, 1,150 yard season, 7 touchdowns, almost 400 yards after the catch. These seem to be numbers that he can sustain, especially in this offense. I think especially in the play action game, he's going to get some favorable matchups in that sense. Going to be facing a lot of zone, I think, from the opposing defenders, which is going to allow him to use that football IQ to figure out, those option routes especially, where he can settle in the soft parts of the zone. And then because he can pretty much run routes all over the field, and because he's got that fearlessness and he's got that ability to be a contested catch type of a guy, somehow at his size, especially over the middle in those short to intermediate areas, it's an asset that they're going to continue to use. The big issue is what they have going on outside. Because outside of him, there's just way too many question marks here. It starts with Keenan Allen returning to the team after being a year in Chicago. He's sort of always been like a bigger slot guy, but with McConkey there, he's going to really settle in, I think, more as a true outside wide receiver in this offense. But how much regression has he faced? How much is he not that guy anymore? I think that's a huge concern I think you got to have, because you're trying to figure out who your outside threats are. Is it Quentin Johnston, who did okay in his first year under Harbaugh, didn't look like a complete bust, but he's still not like this top outside wide receiver. They did go and they added Keenan Allen, and they added Trey Harris, who's a true outside wide receiver from Ole Miss, who had 1,000 yards. He did have a little bit more drops than you would expect, but he's that guy who runs those deep and intermediate routes from the outside, 86% of his snaps from outside. He's pretty much coming in as Quentin Johnston to a large degree of what he was and the role that he played at TCU and the role he was expected to play here. So now they've sort of put these guys in direct competition with each other. They've sort of now entered the same lane that they're driving in together. And I think one thing that can hold Trey Harris back is the drops. 7.7% drop rate. Could that become an issue? It may. You never. That needs to be something that needs to get cleaned up throughout camp. Right now he's projected to be the starter on the outside. But the one thing about this offense with Harbaugh is they pretty much designed it in a way where if you're becoming a detriment, it's almost like what we saw with the New England Patriots before this, where if you're a detriment to the team, he doesn't care who you are, he doesn't care what your contract is, doesn't care when you were drafted. He will replace you. Now, there is a huge advantage I think Harris has over Quentin Johnston, is that Quentin Johnston wasn't drafted by the Harbaugh regime. He was drafted by the previous one. So Trey Harris being able to come in and be the pick of Harbaugh for a very similar role kind of spells doom to a degree for Quentin Johnston. I do like Trey Harris. I think that he can be a great outside wide receiver. He comes in graded higher than Quentin Johnston, but he's still sort of hovering in that wide receiver 3 grading, and that's being optimistic. He is a rookie after all. So they do have some other pieces in there. Darius Davis is really just the kick return guy. Jalen Reagor is going to be like a little slot option, but never really achieved his first round status. Brandon Rice, the son of Jerry Rice, is he going to be capable of breaking out? We'll see. Is he going to get the opportunities to do so? Then you got the tight end position where they pretty much designed their tight end room around, who's going to be the best blocking option, the best sixth offensive lineman. Disley's really good at that. Tyler Conklin is decent at that. They have a Rondé Gadsden, the rookie, who I think could really sneak up and be the receiving tight end threat on this team. And then from the running back perspective, I'm not really overly confident in their ability to be great receiving backs. I think that their role in this offense altogether won't necessarily be as a receiving back anyway. So that's going to be something where how they're used will be probably mostly just in the screen game, staying in and being an extra blocker. I think now, especially with Slater out, that's kind of going to be the role. So whichever one of these running backs becomes the best stay-home blitz pickup running back will probably be the one that gets the most play time in these situations. And it'll be between the two of them, whether it's Harris or Amari and Hampton. That's still yet to be seen. But from a pure running back room perspective, they come in around 21st and 22nd just because there are questions. I do feel like there are question marks in terms of the overall quality of the backs from an individual skill perspective. And how much are they going to be used? How much of this is going to be just a rotation? Is Najee Harris going to be the primary back? Is Amari and Hampton going to be the primary back? I do like Najee Harris. I just don't know that he's going to be used all the way because they did use a first-round pick on Omarion Hampton, who out of North Carolina, I do feel like he was probably worthy of a first-round pick, but I don't know that with the backs that they have that this was the greatest pick in the world because, it's Najee Harris, right? Playing in Pittsburgh, he's coming from the right attitude. It's going to be a nice little, well-fit glove here. Doesn't have a history, at least last year, of ball security issues. He's pretty good after contact, good at making guys miss. Couldn't find the end zone all that much. Had 4 yards of carry, which you can blame the offensive line on that for the most part. He did have 63 missed tackles forced to still get 4 yards of carry. 765 yards after contact. Accounted for 51 first downs. Had 11 carries of more than 15 yards. That's a sneaky good stat for him considering some of the other starting running backs that we've covered didn't really have those types of numbers. You go back and you look at, you can go back and you can look at all the guys who are considered these great backs who just weren't able to have these great breakaway runs. You can look at Kyron Williams, for example, that we just covered, would be an example of that. Didn't really do a whole lot in terms of those big-time runs. Najee Harris was able to find those holes with an offensive line that wasn't necessarily all that great in run blocking. So him coming in, you're getting an experienced guy who understands the assignment. He can carry a workload. He had nearly 300 carries last year, to 260 something, 262 carries last year. Then you bring in Omarion Hampton, who's going to be, I anticipate a 50-50 workload here. He had 275 carries last year, 1,600 yards, just under 6 yards a carry, 15 touchdowns. He accounted for 1,200 yards after contact, 73 missed tackles forced. How is this going to translate to the pro game? You anticipate there's going to be some type of knockoff here, especially because I'm anticipating that him and Najee Harris probably carry the ball about 200 times each this season. So you kind of knock 70 carries off of both of them from their statistical output just a year ago. What does that look like? So from Omarion Hampton's perspective, that probably knocks him down. I could see them both being a 1,000-yard rusher. They can have that double-headed backfield with 2,000-yard rushers for sure. And then probably 7 or 8 touchdowns apiece. I just worry that now when you don't have Rashawn Slater, how this is going to hold this group back. And how often are they going to be able to be in a position to use these guys the right way? Because, I don't anticipate them being used as receiving backs all that much in this offense. If it is, it's going to be a screen pass, but I anticipate a lot of RPOs here. So a well-coached, disciplined defense might be able to shut this thing down, especially, with some more exotic plays, because the interior of this offensive line is not all that great. When Zion Johnson, Bozeman, new guy Mekhi Becton, which we'll get to, there's no reason why they won't produce. How do I say this? I feel like their statistical output this season is going to deceive a lot of people into thinking that maybe that they were better than what they are. Now, there is a world where Greg Roman is such a good coach and such a good play caller, such a good schemer, especially in the run game, that Omarion Hampton or Najee Harris, one of the two, just has this incredibly explosive season because they're able to sort of work around the deficiencies of the offensive line, and one of these guys breaks out, and then they just ride that guy for the whole season. There's definitely a world where that happens, but there's also one where they're so dialed in and they're so focused on making sure that they split the carries and everything that neither one of these guys is going to be able to become the quote-unquote hot hand in the backfield and not be able to get into a true rhythm, running the ball throughout a game. Because that's another thing that is, when you get these running backs by committees almost by design, it's very difficult for any of them to find a rhythm. So they don't really have these breakout performances. They're mostly just, they're there to just keep the offense on or slightly ahead of schedule more than anything else, and then just be an option at the end of the game to be able to put a team away by shortening up the fourth quarter, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another thing that I think could become a detriment here, is that because neither one of these guys is going to be able to get into a true rhythm, they're not going to be able to live up to what could easily be a top 10 backfield if one of them was able to do it and the other one was much more of a straight up design, change of pace, true spell running back for the other. Maybe because they invested a first round pick in Omari and Hampton, that they're just going to ride Hampton that way, and Najee Harris will be like this change of pace guy who takes 25% of the snaps. I think it's possible. I just don't find it to be all that likely. Here's the offensive line that a couple days ago I was quite high on, and now I don't know that I could be much lower on them. I have them as dead last in pass blocking and 25 to 27th in run blocking, tied for 25th. Wow, what a difference losing one elite level player can make. Rashawn Slater, one of the best, if not one of the best in the entire league at everything. One of the few great tackles in the league that's truly balanced in his play as a great pass protector and a great run blocker. A very rare find. Certainly from an overall skill standpoint, top 5 in the entire league. To lose him in the preseason, it really throws everything into flux here, because you had some decent depth, but to play Trey Pipkins now for 17 games or more as a starter just wasn't really in the plans. Now, does it become Jamari Salyer now that you signed Mekhi Becton? Do you kick Salyer back out to tackle? I think that there's going to be some type of competition leading up to the first game in September in Brazil between Pipkins and Salyer, and maybe Tyler McClellan as well. Maybe Branson Taylor or Nash Jones, kicks out from being a guard prospect to a tackle. Maybe they find a way to get a veteran tackle in there that they're more confident with at the right side. Maybe somebody gets cut surprisingly in August that sets them up here, but it's such a significant downgrade. They were top 15 in both of these categories before this. It just goes to show how great Rashawn Slater is. Now, trying to keep up with the positives here to a degree, Joe Alt, who was a great player last year at the right tackle spot, really grew every single week, settled in nicely. Now, after learning the entire offense from the right side of the field, now has to flip to the left side. Now has to take the responsibility of the left tackle role, and he has to now learn that position for this team. Now, from a technique standpoint, you hope that he can just sort of slide back into it the way that he had at Notre Dame previously. Because last year he gave up 6 sacks, 20 pressures, 602 snaps total, took 8 penalties. For all intents and purposes, a quality year. But now he's going to be out there facing the top pass rusher on the team for sure. The backside pass rusher. And he's going to have to do it solo, because they are going to be sliding all the protection to the right side of the field to help out Trey Pipkins, where previously last year, that slide was going to him, which definitely made his job easier. So there is a concern about that, where now he's become the tackle that's truly on the island every single play, and that could become a significant issue for this offense and how the offense produces in pass protection. And a huge advantage he's going to have, though, is the play action game is going to be utilized significantly, which is going to keep a lot of teams honest, which is going to leave those teams being less exotic in terms of how they attack from a defensive line perspective. So that's going to help him. But also, if the running game doesn't perform, if they can't really commit to the running game the way that they want to, and these guys are able to pin their ears back on them and, send blitzes and stunts and all that, it could become a bit of a struggle for Joe Alt in his second season, playing a second position now. As a run blocker last year, he did pretty okay. I thought he was a good run blocker as well. But now again, he slides into this role where now he's expected to be like the top run blocker on the team almost. So it's a lot of added expectations to Joe Alt, where when he initially came to this team, he was the top tackle prospect, but he came to this team as, you're the second tackle on this team to Rashawn Slater. We got a franchise left tackle. We need you to be a great right tackle, but you don't have the expectations of what he would have if he went to another team, say like the Tennessee Titans, who just needed any kind of tackle help, who didn't really have a built foundation. So now he's sort of found himself now in that situation in his second year from a run blocking perspective as well. And a run blocking perspective on a team that's going to run the ball a lot. The snap counts, you can look at the snap counts. You get 408 snap counts for the run, 602 for the pass. That's a very balanced offense, to say the least, at least by modern standards. So we'll see how Joe Alt responds to this last-minute added pressure here. He's playing next to Zion Johnson, who, a former first-round pick who hasn't really lived up to the name either. Hasn't lived up to that first-round designation. So we'll see, another year in this offense. If it, they're giving him the opportunity with that foundation he has as a former first-round pick, hoping that their offense is good enough and the scheme is strong enough that they're going to be able to make it work. Then you got Bradley Bozeman at center. He's going to be competing directly with Andre James, the former Raiders center. They're almost completely identical as players. I think Bozeman does get the starting job over Andre James because he's a better run blocker, and there is this commitment to this team to be a strong running team, especially now. I will see that if Bozeman does struggle in the run game, that he will lose the job to James, because then James comes in with a stronger pass blocking mentality, so they'll at least have some type of positive from that. They brought in Mekhi Becton from the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, excuse me, this sounds like a trap signing to a large degree. Not taking anything away from Becton. When he went to Philadelphia, he became a completely new player. A great player, especially in the run game. But he had a lot of guys around him that were so good that it was almost impossible for him to make mistakes. And he was still making them in pass pro, which doesn't get enough attention, I don't think. In 450 pass pro snaps, he took 3 sacks, 24 pressures as a guard, which, you got Lane Johnson next to you, you got Cam Jurgens to the other side of you. It's not so bad when Mekhi Becton's your worst offensive lineman by like a huge mile. But there is concern now with him coming to this team and him expecting to be, the second best lineman on the team now. Certainly expected to be the best interior offensive lineman they have now. Does he get kicked back out to tackle where he didn't have a whole lot of success? Now that they are in need of a right tackle, do they feel like James can play guard, or does one of the rookies look better? And it just throws him for a loop, having to go back and play right tackle again, where I wouldn't expect a whole lot of success. In the run game, he was a quality zone run blocker, but he also had one of the best running backs in the league, running the football. He had 2 really great run blocking offensive linemen next to him, and Jurgens and Lane Johnson, that weren't really going to open him up to make mistakes. So how much of what he was doing was because his job was made so incredibly simple by the talent around him? Now that he's gone to a team that has significantly less in that aspect, has a lot of potential, but now with going from Lane Johnson to Trey Pipkins and going from Cam Jurgens to Bradley Bozeman isn't exactly a lateral move for Mekhi Becton. So We'll see how he responds to this added pressure and these added expectations that now are being thrust upon him by making this roster change. It's a sad looking group now. It's a detrimental group where now the only thing you really had to worry about was finding the right receiver because you were going to have the pass protection. The pass protection was going to be there. All you had to do is find the right receiver and allow somebody to break out in a receiving group that didn't really look like it had the potential to do anything outside of McConkey. Now, Justin Herbert and Greg Roman and Jim Harbaugh have, between the three of them, have all this added pressure with now that the offensive line is in the condition that it's in. So despite all that, they still come in as my 20th ranked offense. Really carried by the quarterback, I must say, and the offensive coordinator, the offensive coaching. Because they are the 19th ranked pass offense, 26th in rush offense. So it's going to be very scheme reliant. They're going to have to really lean into the play action game to make things easier for the offensive line. And I think potentially they may have to start spreading it out, get less people in the box to open up more lanes for the running game, which really is kind of outside of what we see from Greg Roman, who likes to run a lot of bigger personnel. So we'll see how those adjustments get made to account for this new information they're getting so late in the process.
Now let's go to the defensive side of the ball, which is a very well-coached group as well. A lot of continuity from what they had in Michigan, like I said earlier. Veteran presences all over the field here, and it starts with the defensive line.
They're led by Khalil Mack for the 12th best pass rush, and they're top 4 in run defense still. And that's with losing Poona Ford, who we just covered previously, who, if he was still on this team, this probably would have been the number 1 run defense group, because they would have had the interior of this defensive line really covered, and then to have Khalil Mack and Tuli Tuipulotu on the outside, holding it down from the edge perspective, they would have been top 10 in pass rush. So it is a somewhat significant loss, but they've done a good job of making sure they have the bodies to not have one player's loss or 2 players lost, Joey Bosa as well, be a huge detriment. But Khalil Mack, this late in his career, still playing great football, man. I mean, he was 20th in win percentage. He had 7 sacks, so not quite the super dominant pass rusher that he used to be. 616 snaps, but he had 6 batted balls. So, the football IQ is there. The anticipation is still there. It's just putting the physicality behind it at this point in his career. There's a lot of miles on that body, He's been through a lot in his years, with Chicago and with the Raiders. I think the ability to move him into an off-ball linebacker role is a sneaky way to maybe roll him out in pass rushing situations, turn him into a blitzing linebacker, so maybe he can attack B gaps and stuff like that and take advantage of maybe some less athletic guards while allowing other guys to work the edge like Kyle Kennard and Tuipulotu. We'll see. I mean, I'm just throwing it out there. There's no real evidence that that's ever going to be a thing. Just sort of brainstorming here of how you can maybe make the best of a guy who's still playing at a decent level in pass rushing, but from a run stuffing perspective, he's still top notch, still one of the best in the league at this job, which is why he is still a true number 1 edge player, because he still has the 3-down versatility. He still has the ability to play really smart in the run game. You see it with the batted balls aspect. He's using his eyes and is using his football IQ, and he's using anticipation to really carry him. Now that's really helping him out here in the run game in particular, because he's able to identify where the ball is. He's able to identify, okay, did the quarterback, is this a play action? Is this whatever? What's the offensive line doing? How's the offensive line giving this away? This is the run concepts. How do I counter these run concepts? If this is the run concepts, this is who the guy's coming at me right now in this situation. Now what's my escape plan? And he has that mastered down to a complete science here, and that he's been able to carry that on. Now, there is, because of his age, because of how long he's been playing, at what point does the regression come? Does true regression come where he's not being able to be graded this high? where he regresses down to maybe what you get from a Jadeveon Clowney these days. Just still a good player, but very much a rotational, situational player who you can't just roll out there all game. And he's already kind of in that situation with only 620 snaps, give or take. But now with Joey Bosa gone, maybe they bring Kyle Kennard to be like this rotational guy for him, and Tui Tuipulotu as the younger guy becomes more of the every down end, because I think from a run perspective as well, Tuipulotu was very good as well, especially in his rookie year. Kind of took a step back this past season, but still very good. They have Kyle Kennard, like I said, the rookie, who can be a situational player that they can roll in every now and then. If they want to get a little bit smaller, he can play. They can bump Tuipulotu into more of an interior defensive lineman role. They have Bud Dupree, the veteran, Caleb Murphy maybe, but from a depth perspective, they're really banking, I think, a lot on Kyle Kennard being at least somebody they can put out there and not be a liability as a rookie, somebody that they can just put out mostly probably in passing situations where it's a really simple assignment for him, just go get the quarterback, right? And then from the interior defensive line, they actually, by replacing Poona Ford with a couple of different bodies here, it's creating more of a rotation around what they have from Teair Tart, who sort of alternated playing nose tackle with Poona Ford last year. He took 100 A-gap snaps, 215 B-gap snaps, almost 350 snaps in total, and was quality on every single one of those snaps. There was very few snaps where you looked at Teair Tart and went, wow, he didn't have a good rep there. Most of his reps were fantastic, which is why he comes in with such a high grade. And I think the anticipation that he's now, because of the way that this interior defensive line is set up, he's going to have a lot more snaps coming his way. He'll probably get close to double the amount of snaps that he had from a year ago. So you're going to get added quality here from him. Now, I don't anticipate, because he will play a majority nose tackle role, that he's going to be like this great sack guy or this great pressure guy or this great quarterback hurry guy, because he's going to be facing double teams a lot. And I think that because he's got a lot more situational guys around him, that teams are going to be a lot more comfortable just doubling up on Tart and letting guys go one-on-one with the others, with whoever the other interior defensive lineman is at that time, whether it's Hand, whether it's Jones, whether it's Caldwell, the rookie. We'll see, because Tart also gives such quality from a run perspective as well, because he's able to fight off these double teams. He's able to absorb the double teams also in a way where he's still able to win a little bit, where it forces the running back out towards Khalil Mack, towards Tuipulotu, towards whoever else they're going to have, linebackers coming through with Troy Dye or Henley or Perryman. So he understands the role of being a nose tackle here in the NFL. He understands how to use his size and use his body and be a space eater first, because a lot of guys will kind of have an ego about them and maybe try to play a little bit more athletic than they actually are, and they'll think back to their college days or whatever and think they can be that guy at the pro level. Tart does such a great job of understanding that his role is, I'm a space eater first. I'm a space eater who opens up opportunities for these other guys that are more athletic, that do have more pass rushing moves, that do have more, ability and instincts perhaps. So he plays the role like so fundamentally sound that it will open up opportunities for other players, which is why he gets the high grade, because it's that intangible aspect that really makes him a great player, more so than what you would see from, like Travon Walker, for example, who gets stats, but from a fundamental standpoint, just doesn't have it that way and kind of benefits off the work of others. Teair Tart is that guy who does all this work and then allows others to benefit from them on the stat sheet. So when you look at Deshaun Hand and Naquan Jones, who you're going to see out there, Naquan Jones will probably be the number 2 guy out there as a true interior defensive lineman. I think you're going to see him have a statistical output this season that will maybe be a little bit outside of what his actual overall skill set is. Maybe Deshaun Hand as well. Otito Ogbonnia is listed, I think, as the starter right now. I do feel like that number 2 interior defensive lineman role is a true rotation, though, at this point. So they'll be able to ride the hot hand situationally opposite of Tier Tart, which could be Jamari Caldwell, a guy they picked up as a rookie, who's at least going to come in as a quality run guy. Pass rush, not so much, but it's a good enough rotation where they'll be able to sustain these rankings. But they are, however, in a tougher situation than most teams because their depth is going to have to be just that. They don't really have these quality replacement level starting players. They truly have just like depth prospect types, and then like veteran Bud Dupree, who can be only so one-dimensional. For example, Scott Matlock, who's incredibly one-dimensional. So we'll see how that works out, and you just got to hope that the regression of Khalil Mack does not. But this linebacker group, they are top 5 in coverage, but they are relatively close to bottom 5 in terms of their run defense, which is a huge detriment to this group. They are 25th for me in run defense. Their starters, Deion Henley, Denzel Perryman, with Troy Dye and Junior Colson being their primary rotational guys. I guess situationally, I think Troy Dye on early downs, run ability for Denzel Perryman, who's a little bit an older player, I think makes the most sense. Henley being the green dot, 3-down, all-purpose linebacker is really, I think, where this team is going to go. He had a great season last year, 92 tackles. He had 47 stops, played pretty damn well in pass coverage. Only gave up a 90 passer rating, had 6 pass breakups, only 1 touchdown, given up 1 interception, gave up way less than 10 yards per reception when targeted, played really well in the zones, was able to blitz pretty well when called upon. So I think he really ended up being the great player that they were expecting him to be, and turns out to be a really good number 1 linebacker that they can build around here. Then you throw in Denzel Perryman, the veteran, who, when he's not getting in trouble with the law, is pretty okay. He was targeted 20 times last year, gave up 19 of those catches, 95% catch rate, not great. But only gave up 150 yards and 98.1 passer rating, so he kept everything in front of him pretty well. Was okay when called upon in the run game as well. Made some key stops in some key situations. Just wasn't called upon to do it all that much. Only 42 tackles last year. So he's a really good veteran presence for them to have. You want to see him sure up his tackling. A 21.2% missed tackle rate, not great. But I think that's when Troy Dye really comes in. You allow Perryman to just sort of play situationally on third downs, while Troy Dye really does the dirty work on first and second down. I think that's a pretty good strategy they could roll out for this linebacking group. Junior Colson coming over from Michigan, he does understand the system, but how he's translated to the pro level is still yet to be seen. So you're kind of hoping that he can catch on how to apply that quality that he showed at Michigan to the professional level here. He's going to get the opportunities to do it because outside, again, like I said, outside of Henley, there's going to be like a rotation there between who's linebacker 2 on this team. Delshon Phillips, I think, is going to be more of a special teams guy anyway. If he remains on this team, there is a world where he just outperforms everyone, of course, but I think they've really settled in here with this group. I think this is the group they're comfortable with, that 4-man rotation here, where they're going to be able to play a really solid intermediate zone, shut down the middle of the field really well, the way this defense does, and then just hope that the front 4 does their role as a high-quality top 3, top 4 run defense group that just makes the job easier of these guys. Because, you get the undersizedness of Deion Henley, who's only 225. So there is that aspect sort of hanging over his head as well. So being able to take on these bigger linemen, these blocks as they get to the second level on you, is a detriment to his game. So you're hoping that they can, pin these linemen down. closer towards the line of scrimmage to open up those opportunities for Henley and Perriman and Dye to make plays. Defensive back group is an interesting study. It makes me very fearful, I'll say that, because from an outside corner perspective, there's a lot of question marks here. They have Cam Hart coming into his second season, who had a better than expected rookie campaign, but still more like to be a full-time starter again. You do worry about what he's going to be able to truly do as your number one corner now, because the only other option is Dante Jackson, who hasn't been number one cornerback quality for a while now. He's really just, a low end 2, high end 3, and I got them graded pretty much the same here. It's a different world when you lose the cornerback 1 and then you are thrust into that role. Who takes over that role? Yet to be seen. But the one advantage they're going to have is so much of the game is going to be made so much easier for them on the outside, because between the numbers, this team has it covered in ways that very few others do, and it really carries the overall rating, the overall pass coverage rating of 9th to 10th, and the run defense rating of 14th. It starts with Terheeb Still, who as a rookie came in, played, a mixture of different roles here. I think he's going to settle in as the primary slot corner, but he could end up being an outside guy. He played 580 snaps from the outside last year. He's listed right now as the slot. A B in zone, C+ in man, very balanced, very great balance to his game. Only give up a 79.1 passer rating, 1 penalty. So that's looking up for him. He's not out there making mistakes. When he does give up a reception, he's pretty sure about taking the guy down and making sure nothing more comes of it. Gave up 3 touchdowns, but had 4 interceptions and 4 pass breakups. It'll just be interesting to see what it looks like when his slot snaps go way up, because I think they are going to go way up. His aggressiveness in the run game is, not so much, but that's why you have a guy like Elijah Molden come in, who they brought in last year, who plays like a safety hybrid defensive back. He plays everywhere across the entire defensive back plane, whatever. Primarily played safety last year, but coming over from Tennessee, he did have a lot of snaps where he was playing mostly as a slot guy, but really settled in and being a quality starter as a safety. But he'll still drop down into the box and into the slot. Did it over 150 times last year, but took about 600 snaps as a primary safety in this type of defense, where he on 18 receptions given up only 173 yards. So he was really crashing down on receivers and tight ends really well last year. Pretty good against the run as well. Gets a 74 from me against the run. Didn't give up any touchdowns. A 47.9 passer rating when targeted. So he did a great job of making sure everything got kept in front of him, being very aggressive. That helps when you have a front four that was so successful. Defensive line that was really successful, because it prevents offenses from having a lot of time for longer route combinations to develop and longer concepts to develop. So it allows you to play with more anticipation. He did a really good job at that. And we talked about this being like that Mike McDonald Baltimore Ravens defense that we saw 2 years ago. And then that Kyle Hamilton role goes to Derwin James, who is as good as Kyle Hamilton. And we saw look at the snap counts here. 361 from the slot, 281 from the box, 234 from a traditional safety role. You're going to see that from him again. He's going to be a guy who's going to move around everywhere between the numbers. So focus on keeping him between the hashes, using his size, using his aggressiveness, because he does have really good coverage ability, and he's incredibly good in run defense. So allowing him to be like an 8th man in the box, that bigger nickel, because that's the one thing they're going to roll out for a majority of the year as well, which is why I think Terheeb still will get some more will get those outside corner snaps is because they will use Derwin James as a bigger nickel. They'll put him in the box as like this linebacker in passing situations to cover tight ends and running backs out of the backfield and all that. And he does have this athleticism where he can play a really successful zone coverage against faster slot receivers. So, and being able to throw him back the way they were able to do with Kyle Hamilton in Baltimore to confuse everything, run those 3 high safeties, have him come down and play so many different intermediate area zones extremely effectively. It just makes the job of the offensive coordinator and the quarterback so much harder. Then you have Gilman, who's going to play like that center field safety role for a majority of the season, while Molden, when they get into too high, will be his partner in that most of the time. But we're going to see a lot of just Gilman playing that single high safety with James and Molden playing in, around the numbers, between the numbers and the hashes, with Still and Hart and Dante Jackson. There's a world where all these guys are on the field at the same time, all playing different spots and just playing a very confusing style of zone that opposing offenses just aren't going to be able to identify quickly enough when you have the quality up front that they have that's going to rush this offense. It's going to open up so many opportunities for this defensive back group to execute and force turnovers and keep opposing offenses having to operate faster, keep the yards per completion low, the yards per attempt low, and that's going to open up opportunities for them to keep games shorter. Now, it could lead to a lot of bend don't break if they can't force turnovers and if they can't make big third down plays. So the offense, it does put a little bit of added pressure on the offense, but another way that this group could perhaps not get the type of performances they need is if the guys in front of them, the front 7, the front 4 in particular, don't execute at a high level. If they're not playing fundamentally strong up front, then it will make the job on the back end a lot harder, because having guys being able to jump into different locations, playing different zones, different types of man coverage, different type of switches, forcing an offense to operate quickly in those scenarios is where it comes to your benefit. You just become another type of defense that becomes easier to pick apart because you'll be able to figure out what switches you're doing, who's going to open up. There's always going to be somebody open. There's always a route that's beating your play. And if you allow some of the better quarterbacks in the league, especially in your division, Patrick Mahomes, for example, the time to be able to figure that out, then you will end up in a situation where you might get picked apart a little bit. So the defensive coordinator is going to have to really step up. Minter's going to have to really step up in terms of making sure he's got the right call in the right situation so he doesn't hang this group out to dry. Now, there is also a world where the outside corners are just so bad that teams are going to just completely exploit it all game. And then what do? Then you have no choice, but you kind of got to get outside of what you want to do. And then you got to have Derwin James and Gilman playing these deep cover 2 roles, which then opens up the intermediate areas for teams to, nickel and dime you all the way down the field. So a lot of the pressure could be put on Hart, Jackson, and even Terheeb Still, maybe even Jasir Taylor, to execute on the outside and play strong and confident and understand the scheme, understand your responsibility, and don't get outside yourself. You can't get beat bad, because you're going to be put in a situation where you might end up more on an island. So you're going to have to be, you're going to have to be tight on your guy, because the ball's going to be coming out fast to you in those situations, and you're going to have opportunities if you keep in the receiver's back pocket. So we'll watch how that develops throughout the season. Can Cam Hart continue to build from what he did in his rookie year? Can Dante Jackson get back to what he was more in Carolina? Overall, an incredibly balanced defense. They're my 8th ranked defense, 7th in pass defense, 10th in run defense, 17th defensive coordinator, but with significant growth potential. There is that fear, though, that if things if we get some regression from Khalil Mack and some of these other veterans on this team, that this could be, closer to being outside the top 10 than this. Here's the schedule issue that they have for me, and they're the 12th hardest schedule in the league. 9.5 wins over under. I have it as a push. Now, they did get the Colts. They did get the Titans and the Jags, which are 3 wins. They do get Dallas. Dallas is on the road, but it's late in the year. I do like that game for them. I think they're just a better team than Dallas in that scenario. But they do have an incredibly tough division with the Raiders and the Broncos and the Chiefs, so who knows how those games are going to go. They drew the Giants and the Dolphins on the road, which is tough. That's a tough matchup for them. They did luck out getting Philadelphia and Washington and Minnesota at home, though, and Pittsburgh at home. So that's something there, and they get Houston at home as well late in the year, when hopefully they've had time to put everything together. But there's not a lot of games in here, though, that I don't necessarily go like they're for sure going to lose. The Kansas City and Denver on the road late in the year, sure. There's just a lot of games that you just, you're playing the Raiders. You got Max Crosby and all those guys on that edge room. What's your tackle room going to do? You got the Giants, who have probably the best edge rushing group in the entire league, along with Pittsburgh. What's your offensive line going to look like against those matchups? Those are legitimate why that becomes push games. Because your offensive line could maybe give the game away, especially that early in the year against the Raiders and against the Giants. Even against Miami, like a healthy Miami edge room is pretty deep, pretty good. So it's a tough year, and I wouldn't want to bet now that Slater's out that they're going to be able to get a better than 500 record, like 9-8. It's gonna be a tougher out for them now this year for sure. But with all that said, they're still my 10th ranked team because they're coached so incredibly well. Their defense looks really good. Just, you worry about how effective the pass offense is going to be with the offensive line and with that weapons room. And you just wonder if their running game is going to be able to get into a rhythm because there's going to be just too much pressure on it. The rotation is going to be too frequent, so you're just not going to be able to get that done. So there is issues there. They are 20th in offense for me.
There it is. My number 10 team. We made it to the top 10, guys, and you made it this far in the video, so hit the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the future videos and this gets pushed out in the algorithms. I really appreciate you guys being here, and I will see you guys with the next video next time. Let me know what you think of the Chargers in the comment section.